And if you have regulation, you've got to have supervisors. And supervisors have got to be well paid. They've got to be just as well paid in many ways as the bankers they're supervising.
Go to sleep, my darling. Hush now, don't you cry. I'll stay with you and we'll listen to the monster's lullaby. The mommy and the daddy monsters tuck the little goblins into bed and sing a tune 'neath the harvest moon until the little ones nod their heads. Monsters love to give you a fright and make things go bump in the night. They have such fun at Halloween. They sleep.
I mean, I've been asked really stupid questions as well. Someone else said, "Can you ask David how did dogs learn to swim?" I mean, just
don't give a shit.
I know. Why would somebody send me that? But more, how did you feel about getting hit with custard pies by the scary Canadian pie chuckers? I mean, did you just kind of breeze past that? They were just idiots, weren't they? Anyway,
Yeah, if they had a brain, they'd be even more dangerous.
They just wanted a bit of attention.
Yeah, but they're just silly people, and what they were is classic expressions of the self-pure, self-obsessed left of centre in politics,
Yeah.
where they go on and on about, those people go on and on about globalization, about exploitation of the third world. Here's my heart, it's my heart, look, there it is, look, I'm a really good left.
Yeah, but it's just this, isn't it?
Yeah, and then when someone says, hey, this is how it's all pulled together, this is why this is happening all at the same time, you're a racist. Because this is another important point, I want to make this point.
Okay.
One of the greatest engines and vehicles for this conspiracy is called Zionism. And we need to understand what Zionism is. We have been manipulated to believe that Zionism means Jewish people. It does not. Zionism, I show this in detail in my books, Zionism is a 100% creation of the House of Rothschild, who couldn't give a damn about Jewish people. The House of Rothschild own Israel. They funded the early settlers. They fund it now. They funded the building of the Knesset, the Israeli Parliament. They funded the Supreme Court building, which is full of occult symbols, etc. Which is what the Rothschilds are. They are a black magic family, what people call an occult family, although this, you know, that just means hidden. Going back to the Middle Ages, they in Germany, Rothschild comes from the German Red Shield, and Mayer Amstel Rothschild, who was Mayer Amstel Bauer, he changed the name to Rothschild, Red Shield, because he had a red hexagram on his house in Frankfurt. Where's the hexagram now? The flag of Israel, right? The Star of David is not an exclusively Jewish symbol, and Jewish historians will tell you this. It became associated with Jewish people when the Rothschilds took it as their symbol. The Rothschilds are the people behind Zionism. They hung them out to horrific treatment in Germany because the Rothschilds were behind the Nazis. The Rothschilds connect with the Rockefellers. The Rockefellers are subordinate to the Rothschilds. So what you had in World War II was the Allies and the United States, which are, in terms of their governments, were fronts for this network, not least, especially the Rothschilds. And you had the Nazis that were a front for the Rothschilds, and you had Russia that was a front for the Rothschilds. And they were played off against each other in a war, which did what? Transformed global society. At the end of the First World War, same situation, power in the world was in far fewer hands than it was before. After the Second World War, power was in even fewer hands than it was before, and we had this explosion of world global organizations like the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and so on, and we've since got the World Trade Organization to stop people defending their own economies from the world system they have no control over, and it was all problem, reaction, solution. We had the creation of Israel being manipulated by the Rothschild family going way back into the 1800s. And then we had something called the Balfour Declaration during the First World War, where Lord Balfour, the Foreign Secretary in Britain, which was very powerful at that time with still a remnants of an empire at least, he made a declaration that the British government supported a Jewish homeland in Israel. And people think, well, Balfour Declaration, he must have stood up and spoken in Parliament or something. No, no. The Balfour Declaration, as I show in my books, was a letter sent by Lord Balfour, an inner circle member of an elite secret society called the Round Table, to Lord Rothschild, who was the funder and creator of the Round Table. And the letter was written by Lord Rothschild for Balfour to send. After the First World War, they had the Versailles Peace Conference, in which people from France and Britain and America, etc., got together. The major players in the Versailles Peace Conference from all these countries were either Rothschild bloodline or were agents and activists for the Rothschilds. They decided how Europe was going to be, and many other lands were going to be carved up. They produced the sanctions against Germany that led to the chaos that brought Hitler to power. All these things are a sequence that are all planned. They're planned by the minute or even the decade. And as a result of the horrific way that Jewish people were treated in Germany, the Rothschilds then started using that to push for a homeland in Israel. They funded the terrorist groups called Irgun, the Stern Gang and others that bombed Israel into existence in 1948 and caused 800,000 Palestinian people to leave their homeland in terror. Jewish people that had lived in harmony with the Palestinians for sometimes centuries were horrified by this. There were movements by, attempts by these indigenous, if you like, Jewish people in Palestine to turn Jerusalem into an international city through the UN so that there wouldn't be this takeover. And there are organizations, Jewish organizations around the world who have been created to challenge Zionism because they say, for a start, it's against Judaism. But what they've done, Kirk, is this, the Rothschilds, is they have, through propaganda and repetition, equated Zionism, which is a political creed, with Jewish people, which is not a political creed. And so you have vast numbers of people who are Zionists who are not Jewish, like the Christian Zionists in America, and you have significant numbers of Jewish people who are not Zionists. So what you had in World War II was the Allies and the United States, which are, in terms of their governments, were fronts for this network, not least, especially the Rothschilds. And you had the Nazis that were a front for the Rothschilds, and you had Russia that was a front for the Rothschilds. And they were played off against each other in a war, which did what? Transformed global society. At the end of the First World War, same situation, power in the world was in far fewer hands than it was before. After the Second World War, power was in even fewer hands than it was before, and we had this explosion of world global organizations like the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and so on. And we've since got the World Trade Organization to stop people defending their own economies from the world system they have no control over. And it was all problem, reaction, solution. We had the creation of Israel being manipulated by the Rothschild family going way back into the 1800s. And then we had something called the Balfour Declaration during the First World War, where Lord Balfour, the Foreign Secretary in Britain, which was very powerful at that time with still a remnants of an empire at least, he made a declaration that the British government supported a Jewish homeland in Israel. And people think, well, Balfour Declaration, he must have stood up and spoken in Parliament or something. No, no. The Balfour Declaration, as I show in my books, was a letter sent by Lord Balfour, an inner circle member of an elite secret society called the Round Table, to Lord Rothschild, who was the funder and creator of the Round Table. And the letter was written by Lord Rothschild for Balfour to send. After the First World War, they had the Versailles Peace Conference, in which people from France and Britain and America, etc., got together. The major players in the Versailles Peace Conference from all these countries were either Rothschild bloodline or were agents and activists for the Rothschilds. They decided how Europe was going to be, and many other lands were going to be carved up. They produced the sanctions against Germany that led to the chaos that brought Hitler to power. All these things are a sequence that are all planned. They don't plan it by the minute or even the decade. And as a result of the horrific way that Jewish people were treated in Germany, the Rothschilds then started using that to push for a homeland in Israel. They funded the terrorist groups called Irgun, the Stern Gang and others that bombed Israel into existence in 1948 and caused 800,000 Palestinian people to leave their homeland in terror. Jewish people that had lived in harmony with the Palestinians for sometimes centuries were horrified by this. There were movements by, attempts by these indigenous, if you like, Jewish people in Palestine to turn Jerusalem into an international city through the UN so that there wouldn't be this takeover. And there are organizations, Jewish organizations around the world who have been created to challenge Zionism because they say, for a start, it's against Judaism. But what they've done, Kirk, is this, the Rothschilds, is they have, through propaganda and repetition, equated Zionism, which is a political creed, with Jewish people, which is not a political creed. And so you have vast numbers of people who are Zionists who are not Jewish, like the Christian Zionists in America, and you have significant numbers of Jewish people who are not Zionists. And what they've done then, again the Rothschilds, is to create a series of organizations. One of them is called B'nai B'rith, started in the 1800s, which produced in the early part of the 20th century an horrendous organization called the Anti-Defamation League, or ADL. And these organizations, their prime total role, in terms of the ADL particularly, is to target anyone that exposes the Rothschilds as a racist and an anti-Semite. So what they've done is create Zionism, which in effect, when you see it on the correct perspective, is a secret society. And then you have organizations that are just sitting there waiting for anyone that starts to expose the plot and its connection to the Rothschilds to be an anti-Semite. And who is writing the hate laws in America and other countries? The Anti-Defamation League. The Rothschilds are writing hate laws to protect themselves from exposure through branding people anti-Semites. And when you see my philosophy on life, which I go into detail in my books, and the nature of reality, to judge somebody by their body, by their racist, racial state, is extraordinarily stupid and insane and juvenile. But you know, they've thrown that stuff at me in the past. They've not made it stick, and so, you know, it's gone quiet on that front, because when you see my philosophy on life, to call me a racist is ludicrous. What I am, however, is a pursuer of the truth and what's behind this conspiracy, and one of the prime forces behind it is the House of Rothschild. And they own vast tracts of the economy behind front organizations and nominee directors and other people. Like the Rockefeller empire was funded into existence by the Rothschilds. J.P. Morgan, that empire was funded into existence by the Rothschilds. The Carnegie empire, the Harriman empire, the railway empire, all came through funding from the Rothschilds. It was the Rothschilds, through a bank called Kuhn Loeb, which was headed by a guy called Schriff, who that family lived in the same house as the Rothschilds in Frankfurt, that funded the Russian Revolution, which was to, again, create divide and rule, to change the face of the world. And so the Rothschilds are fundamental in this. And so when I talk about Zionism, any time now, I call it Rothschild Zionism. And I really, if people want to kind of look at this, Rothschild Zionism, let's keep repeating this, because that is the true nature of what Zionism is. It's not for what's best for Jewish people, any more than a mass vaccination of children is to help children. And if you look at the background to the financial crash in America, was brought about by Alan Greenspan, Rothschild Zionist, who was followed as head of the Fed by Bernard Bernanke, Rothschild Zionist. Other people involved who were brought in by Obama to then be his Treasury Secretary and top economic advisors were Tim Geithner, Rothschild Zionist. They were Larry Summers, Rothschild Zionist. When you look at the people who are controlling the White House with Obama as a front, they are his White House Chief of Staff, Rahm Emanuel, who is such an extreme Rothschild Zionist that his father was a member of the Irgun terrorist group that helped to bomb Israel into existence, and his chief senior White House advisor is a guy called David Axelrod, extreme Rothschild Zionist, who was the man that ran his entire election campaign against Hillary Clinton and against John McCain. And you look at the people, the two people running his global warming operation, or his climate change operation as they call it now, both Rothschild Zionists. You look at the man who is running the British government currently and totally, Peter Mandelson, Rothschild Zionist, an agent and very close friend and associate of the Rothschild family.
He's been seen at Bilderberg meetings.
Oh, of course.
Recently called, he was saying, you know, Britain really should get into the euro currency. You know, it's about time.
Well, of course, because that's the job. Peter Mandelson is in government to advance the agenda of the Rothschild Zionists, just the same as Rahm Emanuel and David Axelrod are in the White House. You look at the head of the World Bank, a guy called Zoller, Rothschild Zionist. You look at the French guy who heads the International Monetary Fund, Rothschild Zionist. They have this secret society controlled by the Rothschilds that doesn't give a damn about Jewish people. In fact, has used them mercilessly in the past and plans to do again to advance their agenda. They have stitched up the entire world economy. And people like Blair and Obama are just their fronts. This is why, you see, Israel is the biggest recipient of foreign aid and foreign military funding from the United States than any other country in the world, when it's one of the highest per capita income states in the world. This is why Israel has nuclear weapons, but no one ever talks about them. There is even an official policy, which was confirmed that it will continue by Obama, where they just don't talk about them. They don't say, question them. They know they've got them. A guy, such a brave Jewish man called Vanunu, Mordecai Vanunu, went to jail for 18 years in Israel for saying they have nuclear weapons, right? Israel, this sliver of piece of land, and you can drive around it in a day, virtually, has the biggest F-16 fleet outside America. And they were given to, allowed to have them at knockdown prices by the comptroller of the Pentagon at the time, and the comptroller at the time of 9/11, a guy called Icke Rothschild Zionist. The guy who was running the Pentagon, in truth, during 9/11 was a guy called Paul Wolfowitz, who then became head of the World Bank and had to resign over a scandal, Rothschild Zionist. And the whole Bush administration was controlled by a group called the neoconservatives, or neocons, that were awash with Rothschild Zionists, people like Pearl and Feith and all the rest of them. And so it's an elephant in the living room, Kirk, but people are terrified of seeing it because they get called racist, when what you're saying is not this is a Jewish plot. It isn't. The vast majority of Jewish people are victims of this conspiracy, not least in Germany. This is a plot by a network of families which use Zionism, a secret society in truth, to advance its agenda, and to use allegations of racism against researchers to stop the Rothschilds being exposed. Well, you can do what you like, darlings, right? Call me what you like. Don't give a shit. I ain't shutting up.
Brilliant. And just, can we stop in there?
Yeah, we can throw one more and then I've got to go.
The left-right paradigm in this country, we start off, people didn't really believe it, but we start off with the Tories, they're corrupt, they're terrible, we shift to Labour, 10 years later everyone else is sick of them. The agenda continues on and on and on. What can we do? Should we get involved at a government level?
The voting is irrelevant, because it doesn't matter who you vote for, the government still gets in.
Yep.
The secret government that is behind both governments. I talk about the neocons in America and the democons, because you have a group of people behind Republican leaders like Bush, then you have a group of people behind Democrat leaders like Obama and Clinton. And this is why Obama's filled his administration with former Clinton people, right? Because they're the same gang. They're what I call the democons. And then you have them both answering to the same master, which means that no matter who's in power, this is still in control. You have the same in Britain. You know, the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats, that's less relevant, but still relevant to an extent, but the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats and the other alternative government, in truth, the Conservatives, they have groups of people, just the same, which are eventually answering to the same masters. So whether it's Blair or whether it's David Cameron, doesn't matter. I mean, just look at them. I mean, you know, they're clones of each other. So I haven't voted for decades. No point. You know, this change is not going to come through political change. It's going to come through people ceasing to cooperate with their own enslavement. A simple example. Someone gets fined £200 for putting a wheelie bin out the wrong day, their rubbish bin, which is what has happened.
Yeah.
Next day, thousands of people put their wheelie bins out. Next day more. Next day more. How are they going to cope with that? They can't. They have to have divide and rule, so people pick them off. You know, when you told me the story about the guy who was approached by the environmental police,
Yeah.
And you came over and got involved, they were angry that you got involved.
Oh, furious.
Because they don't want people coming together because they lose their power. They want people picked off as one. So, you know, when someone sees injustice in any area of life that doesn't affect them, if we're going to sort this out, that has to become our injustice. Because if it doesn't, then we're back to that wonderful saying by that Christian pastor who lived through Nazi Germany, where he said afterwards, first they came for the Jews and I was not a Jew, so I did nothing. Then they came for the communists and I was not a communist, so I did nothing. Then they came for the trade unionists and I was not a trade unionist, so I did nothing. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak out for me. Everybody's injustice, whether it's injustice against Jewish people, it's justice against Islamic people, it's injustice against Christian people, or whatever. When someone who's saying something we don't agree with and vehemently oppose has their freedom of speech taken away, we don't say round of applause. We should be saying that's injustice because of this reason. If anybody on this planet does not have the freedom to express their view, then no one does. Because the moment one person is edited and censored, that means all that's left is for people to have a view that's within the acceptable range of what views you can have. So it's not a free view at all. It's not free expression at all. It's expression within the censorship lines. So if people say abusive things about me, I'm not interested in shutting them up. My prime desire is for people to have the freedom to express their view. The right to be wrong and the right to talk total bollocks is fundamental to the human right of free expression in general. And they're trying to get people to support the suppression through hate laws and stuff like that of views they don't agree with. And in doing so, pick off, step by step, the right of people to express their views, more and more details of what you can say until eventually it hits you.
There's nothing.
And now you're affected. And you go, you can't stop me saying that. Oh, you were quite okay with stopping all these people saying this.
Yeah.
First they came for the Jews and I was not a Jew, so I did nothing. It's exactly the same thing. So we need to start saying any injustice is our injustice. If someone is given a ridiculous fine or treated in a ridiculous way because of the thought police and the police state, then we need to start doing exactly what they've been fined for en masse. Because they can't cope with that.
And that'll break the system.
They can only cope with... so my son's coming. I've got to take him to the cricket. Hold on a second, I'm talking. One me a sec, mate. Okay. If we don't, then they're going to divide and rule us to total global enslavement. And so we need to see that someone's right to say what we don't agree with is equally valid to someone having the right to say what we do agree with.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you for your time today.
Cheers.
And
I'm a taxi. I've got to go to the cricket.
All right.
It's the one time I get out of the house at the moment.
Like the pharaohs of ancient Egypt who built their empire with the help of a grand vizier, Queen Elizabeth II also has a grand vizier, serves as her most trusted advisor. His name is Lord Evelyn Rothschild, and he is the second wealthiest and most powerful person on earth. He is also Lord of the world's financial capital, the city-state of London. Lord Rothschild and his ring of power hide their identities behind 13 city council members who stand in as their representatives. On November 30th, 2000, Lord Rothschild, now in his 70s, got married in London to a wealthy Zionist businesswoman named Lynn Forrester. The couple then jetted to Washington and spent their wedding night in the White House. Just how rich and powerful is Lord Evelyn Rothschild? Historically, the Rothschild family wealth was hidden in underground vaults. The Rothschild secret financial records were never audited and never accounted for. Their family commissioned biographies give the illusion that their family fortune has dwindled, but researchers estimate their wealth at close to $500 trillion, more than half the wealth of the entire world. Besides their many castles, palace mansions, wineries, racehorses, and exotic resorts, the Rothschilds bought Reuters in the 1800s. Reuters then bought the Associated Press, which selects and delivers the same news stories to the entire world, day after day. They have controlling interest in 3 major television networks and easily avoid media attention since they own it. Until recently, they owned and operated England's Royal Mint and continue to be the gold agent for the Bank of England, which they also direct. They control the LBMA, London Bullion Market Association, where 30 to 42 million ounces of gold worth over $11 billion are traded daily. The Rothschilds earn millions weekly just on transaction fees alone. They also fix the world price of gold on a daily basis and profit from its ups and downs. Over the centuries, the Rothschilds have amassed trillions of dollars worth of gold bullion in their subterranean vaults and have cornered the world's gold supply. They own controlling interest in the world's largest oil company, Royal Dutch Shell. They operate phony charities and offshore banking services where the wealth of the black nobility in the Vatican is hidden in secret accounts at Rothschild Swiss banks, trusts, and holding companies. How did Evelyn Rothschild become the filthy rich Grand Vizier to Queen Elizabeth II and godfather of the black nobility? By birth, Evelyn Rothschild is the great-great-great-grandson of Mayer Rothschild and is passing the godfathership down to David de Rothschild. Although Evelyn Rothschild looks like a harmless gray-haired old man, make no mistake about it, Rothschild and his ancestors have handpicked presidents, crashed stock markets, bankrupted nations, orchestrated wars, and sponsored the mass murder and impoverishment of millions. The wealth hoarded by this one family alone could feed, clothe, and shelter every human being on earth.
Could never be wrong, but only for the better and I'll never for the worst. Place here with the Lord's care to share this all. Stop fighting and fighting, we're just denying ourselves. Life and love is one, the deeper you delve. Stop killing and telling by you thinking of gold. Forget the body and remember the soul. Life is worth more than gold. A soul should never be sold. A life should never be sold. 'Cause life is worth more than gold. We don't need it, do we? We don't need it, do we? We don't need it. No. We don't need it, do we? We don't need it, do we? We don't need it. No. More than gold, plain to see. Jesus once sent us, set the precious stone free, but the heart of heart living inside our soul. Spiritual entity, the silent call, the flower with the power to live in 2 worlds. The innocent allegiance of the boy and the girl. We had to say it, they must be told. Life is worth much more than gold. Life is worth more than gold. A soul should never be sold. A life should never be sold. 'Cause life is worth more than gold. We don't need it, do we? We don't need it, do we? We don't need it. No. We don't need it, do we? We don't need it, do we? We don't need it. No. The rain that sees, I dream. The clouds are past, I dream. The pain that leaves, I dream. That my dream comes fast, I dream. The shadows that blight, I dream. For peace tonight, and I dream of of an end to war. Have you dreamed this dream before? Life is worth more than gold. A soul should never be sold. A lie should never be told. 'Cause life is worth more than gold. We don't need it, do we? We don't need it, do we? We don't need it. We don't need it, do we? We don't need it, do we? We don't need it. I dream. We don't need it, do we? We don't need it. I dream. We don't need it, do we? We don't need it.
I think it's pretty certain it will go through, because the Senate, being the senior house, although perhaps the House of Representatives doesn't like that thought, has put quite a lot of pressure. And I'd be very surprised if it doesn't go through. But obviously, if it doesn't go through, we have an impasse which is very serious. And what does that mean? I think we have to learn.
You've been around in senior position in the city for a very, very long time indeed. Do you think what we're looking at here is not just a failure of sort of technical matters, but a change in the way people do business, in the way that ethics work in the financial world?
Well, I wrote about this some time ago, and I think that it is right. I think what's happened is that the expansion of financial world is huge. If you look back over 50 years, there was only probably about 50 banks in the world. Today it's not just banks, it's financial instruments. And if you do not regulate them, and you let everyone do what they want to do, then you're bound to get sometimes trouble which ensues.
شو سبب تدمير العراق وغزو العراق وقتل مليون عراقي؟ وخلاص لقانا الامريكان يجاوبونا على السؤال اللي حاير، لماذا العراق؟ شو سبب؟ بن لادن عراقي؟ ما هو عراقي. اللي ضربوا نيويورك عراقيين؟ ما هم عراقيين. اللي ضربوا البنتاغون عراقيين؟ ما هم عراقيين. فيها أسلحة دمار شامل عند العراق؟ ما عندها. وحتى لو عند العراق أسلحة دمار شامل، أو باكستان عندها قنبلة ذرية، والهند عندها قنبلة ذرية، والصين وروسيا وبريطانيا وفرنسا وأمريكا، ما كلها عندهم قنابل ذرية. كلها بيدمروها كويس. فندمر كل الدول اللي عندها أسلحة دمار شامل. تجي قوة أجنبية تحتل دولة عربية وتشنق رئيسها، واحنا نتفرج عليهم ونضحكوا. وليش ما نحقوا في شنق صدام حسين؟ كيف يصير حرب يشنق ورئيس دولة عربية عضو في الجامعة العربية؟ لما تكلموا عن سياسة صدام حسين والخلافة معاه السياسيين، ممكن كلنا مختلفين سياسيين معاه، مختلفين حتى مع بعضنا نحن الآن. ما في حاجة تجمعنا أبدا إلا القاعة هذه. ليش ما يكون فيها تحقيق في مقتل صدام حسين؟ قيادة عربية بالكامل تقتل تشنق في المشانق، ما نتفرج. لماذا؟ ما ممكن الدور جاي عليكم كلكم. نعم. ليش امريكا قاتلت مع صدام حسين ضد الخميني؟ كان صديقها. تشيني كان صديق لصدام حسين. رامسفيلد كان وزير دفاع الامريكا لما كان يدمروا في العراق، صديق حميم لصدام حسين، واخيرا باعوه وشنقوه. حتى انتم اصدقاء امريكا، نحن اصدقاء امريكا، بلاش نقول انتم، نحن اصدقاء امريكا كلنا قد توافق امريكا على شنقنا في يوم ما. الاخ عمر موسى عنده فكره متحمس له برنامج ذكره حتى الان، او ذكره في تقريره، ان العرب من حقهم ان يستخدموا الذره للأغراض السلميه، ويجب يكون في برنامج عربي نووي. هذا من حقهم، من حقهم حتى البرنامج النووي غير ذلك، لكن الله غالب. لكن من هم العرب اللي تقول لي يعملوا برنامج نووي واحد؟ من هم العرب؟ احنا شو للاسف الشديد احنا اعداء لبعضنا، احنا شو كل نكره بعضنا ونتخاصم مع بعضنا ونكيد لبعضنا ونشمت في بعضنا ونتآمر على بعضنا. احنا مخابراتنا نتآمر على بعضنا، ما تحمي فينا من العدو. احنا عدو لبعضنا، وعدو العربي صديق للعربي الاخر. ويا ريت هالشد اللي استخدموا فيها وهالحديه ضد بعضنا استخدموها ضد العدو.